Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Bol Jock with the Jikmir Developmental Model. On today's video, we'll do a comparative analysis between the Jikmir Developmental Model and Dr. John Garang Dissertation, which he conducted in 1981. So when it comes to the Dr. John Garang Dissertation, before we start on that, we need to understand what is the Jonglei Canal Project, also known as the Jonglei Projects Area, JPA. And understanding this project will give you a foundation of how you can understand his dissertation. Right? So the Jonglei Project Area was the project initiated by, it's a multinational project between Egypt and Sudan. Right? And that multinational project was initiated even before the independence of South Sudan. It was 1954. Right? And that was initiated by Jonglei Investigation Teams. So that investigation team went to the south and conducted analysis of the area for irrigation reasons, right? Because they realized that there is a problem with irrigation in the north, both Sudan and Egypt. So they went and look at the areas that they can get water from. So that's where the Jonglei Canal Project initiated from. So, and it started back in 1954. So even the country itself was not independent then. And then in 1978, that's when the project kicked off. Because the first one was just exploration of areas where the water can be explored from or can be exported from. And they discovered that, hey, the Jonglei is the suitable area for that. But in 1978, that's when the project kicked off. It's like, okay, we find the area, now we can do an analysis on how we can implement this. Right? And then the issue with, or the reason for the Jonglei Canal was Sudan and Egypt was dealing with irrigation problem within their farms. So they have to go and find a way to irrigate their lands. And Jonglei Canal was the solution to that problem. And in Sudan, when they become independent, the agriculture was the bloodline of the Sudan economy. Again, so that make it even more important for that project to be conducted. So the Sudan can go and irrigate their land in the north during the dry season, or they can have a sustainable water where they could control the agriculture. Right? And when you look at it, at that time, 70 to 80% of the labor force were working in the agriculture sector. So it is a pretty big deal for Sudan economy to find a way to control the irrigation issue. And Jonglei Canal was that answer. So Sudan was gaining and Egypt was gaining at the same time. So they initiated this project. And the agriculture served as the gross domestic product, increase the gross domestic product for the Sudan. Right? So that's why even more important for them to have that project, to have the Jonglei Project Area, JPA, being initiated. And then now we know the interest and the reasons for Egypt and Sudan, North Sudan, wanting this project. What about the south, the autonomous region of the Sudan? Well, what was their approach to this? So they were suspicious. They were suspicious, according to his dissertation. They were suspicious on the local communities, right? Because they did not get any. They did not give any input at all on what this project is. It's somebody coming to do this project in their land. So with that, specifically, there were no input from the Shilluk, there is no input from the Nuer or from the Denkas, which are the local communities that will be affected by this project. And in 1983, the war started. Even though the Jonglei Canal initiative has started, a year later there was the Sudan Civil War, right? And again, it happened. It started in Jonglei, right? So one could say maybe there is a correlation there, why that thing happened. So in 1984, that project was halted. So that is the background to the background to the Jonglei Canal, and to give you a foundation of way to look at the dissertation, Dr. John Garang dissertation from, right? So because his dissertation is focused on this project, this mega project, and what's impact does it have on the locals, on the economies, and other things, right? So between Sudan and Egypt, they collaborated to come up with this project. And the reason for this project is that it's to bring economic development to the Sudan, right? And the Jonglei Canal, the Jonglei regions was a strategic selection for this mega project. And then also the aim of that project was the agriculture as the main backing of Sudan economy. Right? So the Sudan economy at the time, which was in 1969 to 70, was 80% of the labor force were working in the agriculture industry. So the Sudan was trying to expand that industry into the southern part of Sudan, which was known as the Tanima South. So that was the aim of that. And the two countries were collaborating because they can get some water. That canal could be able to carry water from the south, from the Sud in the south to the north, where there was some irrigation issue. And the approach with Dr. John Garang dissertation was a top-down approach. And the project was a mega project. So it's a multinational project between Sudan and Egypt and other Arab countries that may need some agricultural products. So the Jonglei Canal projects were to be completed by 1985. Also connected to that is the mega projects or mega agricultural projects in the north and in Egypt. Right? So given that they have some water issues, the canal were able to carry the water from the south to the north and to Egypt. So in that case, what was the outcome of the initiative? What was the aim of the initiative? So the first one is the mega agriculture I mentioned earlier, having that mega agriculture projects being the main backing of Sudan economy. Mentioned earlier, 80% of the people were employed in the agricultural sector. So Sudan was trying to expand that sector so it could be able to have a strong economy or have a backing that is strong. Right? And on that one, it says that as part of the dissertation, the Sudan was described as the breadbasket of the Middle East. We're just showing that the multinational level to the project. Right? So, and then during that time, the aim was the Sudan, if it were used properly, it can feed 1/3 of the world population, which is pretty significant. So, and then it would increase the gross domestic product for Sudan, GDPs. So that was the three central areas Dr. John Garang dissertation focused on. The top-down approach to socio-economic development, which is being driven by the North Sudan and in Egypt, having that mega project so they can be able to support their agriculture in the north or in the desert. And the second part was having that mega project, which is a government-centric project, to ensure they could be able to employ their populations. And then the outcome of that were the mega agriculture projects to be a strong backing for the Sudan economy and serve as a breadbasket for Middle East and feeding 1/3 of the world population. That's the capacity it has, and then increase the GDPs for the Sudan. How is it different from the Jikmir Development Model? The Jikmir Development Model is the bottom-up approach to the development and administration, which in that term, it's an agile approach to the development, to where it's going to be at smaller areas, but it could be also be responsive to change. So what does that mean? Establishing sustainable development and administration at the grassroots, which is Payam and Boomers, and then emphasize local securities, because if the locals are owning their security, then they could be able to be responsible for their own security, their own well-being. And then agriculture as the main backing of Sudan economy, that would, for this one, it would be diversified. It would be multiple sectors, right? You would not be relying on agriculture as we've seen on the previous or Dr. John Garang dissertation. So with that, the projects, what are the projects that the Jikmir Developmental Model aim for? So the projects would be local centrics. So there will be the local communities driving that projects, right? So you're giving them that ownership, and that is grassroots local security initiatives, and also would need to be conduct a needs assessment for the locals. What are the local needs? Because as we've seen on the Jonglei Canal Project, it wasn't local driven. It was a centralized government driven. They identify, hey, we need water, we need strong backing of our economy. So guess what? We're going to do this canal. There wasn't much input from the local, versus the Jikmir Development Model want to emphasize local initiatives, or their inputs, at least their inputs being valued to the level where it needs to be. And then involvement of experts to guide the local organizations. Yes, there may be some gaps in their understanding of modernization and modern structure, but they should be expert helping them rather than experts saying that, hey, you need this. No, you could guide them in their transformation to the new era. And then what are the outcomes for the Jikmir Development Model? What initiative would that? What outcome of this initiative? The first one would be establishing a diversified and sustainable labor market. Right. So we mentioned earlier the agriculture or the Jonglei Canal. The focus were on agriculture, versus the Jikmir Development Model doesn't specify any specific sector. It just needs to be diversified. It could be fishery, it could be mining, it could be agriculture, it could be oil. Any of those, it would be a diversified type of economy being backed by diversified different sectors. Right? And another outcome is to jumpstart local economies using the available resources. So if there are resources that can be utilized, they should be utilized to jumpstart the local economies so they can, again, provide a diversified economies to support the national economies. And then the local communities should be empowered to take ownership of their security, right? Rather than having central government dictating how they live. The locals should be given empowerment to where they can provide their security with assistance from the government, of course, but they should be given empowerment to make sure that they take ownership of their security. Right? And then you could ask yourself, okay, well, there are some differences between the two, but what are the similarities? Where do the two approaches meet? The first one is they both focus on the rural area, right? With Dr. John Garang dissertation, it is on the Jonglei Canal projects. But it's also, even though it is a Jonglei as a region, it's still focusing on the locals, on the local communities, which is Jonglei in this case. And then for Jikmir Developmental Model, the focus is on transformation of South Sudan villages at all levels, at that level, and then it could be at any areas. And then the sustainable economy, also they share that approach, having a sustainable economy that can be able to sustain itself. Dr. John Garang proposes that agriculture should be the backing of the economy, which is a sustainable source, right? Because anybody could grow it, and the land is fertile, right? So it's a sustainable source for the economy. Similarly, with Jikmir Development Model, it proposes that diversify the market, right? Diversify the labor market to where different sectors can be able to contribute to the national economies, right? Again, they share the same approach to sustainable economy. And then economic inclusivity, right? To where Dr. John Garang proposed that the Jonglei Canal should incorporate local communities' inputs in Jonglei, specifically from Shuluk, from Nuer, and from Denkas. Right? Those were the locals in that area when this study was done. And he proposes that instead of doing it without local inputs, the locals should be given opportunity to provide their inputs on that. So on that part, the economic inclusivity is shared by both approaches. Right? And then you ask yourself, okay, well, with Dr. John Garang, the study being in 1981, over 40 years ago, what is the current state now in South Sudan? What is the South Sudan government is doing in relation to both Jikmir Developmental Model and Dr. John Garang dissertation proposal? So if we look at it, current economic situation is 98% of South Sudan revenue comes from Chinese oil purchases, so oil industry, and loans, international loans. So, and most of these remain in the central area, which is mostly Juba, right? And another thing is there are no functioning governmental structure at the grassroots administration, Payam and Boomers. So you could find some administration at the county, state, and central. But when it comes to that lower echelons, there isn't much administration. And then South Sudan population continue to rely heavily on humanitarian aid or farming or their own fishing, right? There is no actual modernized economy that they are utilizing. Right? And there is no plan in place to transition the villages to modern city. Or in Dr. John Garang case, it would be there is no mega economic projects, social economic projects that is focusing on developing a sustainable economy. So both the transitioning villages to towns is not there, and there are no mega projects that can back the economy. And then with the last one is the private sector is very limited, right? It's as I mentioned on the first one, there are 98% of South Sudan revenues, or South Sudan governmental revenues, come from Chinese oil purchases and loans. So that's a very high number, and it's not sustainable. Right? And there is no plan of transitioning the the economy to the private sectors. In today's video, we conducted a comparative analysis between Dr. John Garang dissertation, specifically when it comes to Jonglei Canal Project, and compare that to the Jikmir Developmental Model. We looked at the historical portion of the Jonglei Canal. We also looked at Dr. John Garang dissertation, what outcomes that come from that. Then we did the contrast, Jikmir Developmental Model and Garang dissertation. And we also look at the similarities between the two. Well, what are the similarities between the two? And finally, we look at the current state of South Sudan in relation to socioeconomic development.